My name is Evelyn Harper, and I am 75 years old. Until last year, I believed that love and sacrifice were enough to keep a family together. I was wrong. It was my birthday, a day I had always quietly cherished. A day when I expected warmth, gratitude, and at least a small acknowledgement from the son I had raised alone. I arrived at Robert and Karen's house early, wearing the soft blue sweater he had given me years ago, one that made me feel remembered and loved. In my hands, I carried a lemon cake I had baked with trembling hands and a small bouquet of freshly picked daisies from my garden. I walked in expecting hugs, a smile, maybe laughter from my grandchildren, but instead I was met with brief nods and polite murmurs. The children barely looked at me before running off to play, and Robert gave me a dry, perfunctory happy birthday. Mom, Karen glanced up from her phone and smirked. "Oh, you're early," she said, as if my very presence were inconvenient. Then came the card. Robert handed it to me, asking me to read it out loud so everyone could hear. My hands shook as I opened it, and at first I thought it was sweet. But as I began reading, the words struck me like icy blades. "Mom, you've done a lot, but you're slowing down. You don't belong here anymore. You take up space and energy. Maybe it's time to consider other options." I froze, my voice barely audible. Laughter followed Robert's sharp, sarcastic laugh, Karen's soft but mocking chuckle. Even the children, sensing the adults' amusement, giggled nervously. I felt my heart crack. The cake in my hands wobbled and fell to the floor. "It's just a joke," Robert said. But there was no warmth in his tone, only a quiet accusation. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. You've always been too sensitive." I walked home slowly, my legs trembling, every step heavier than the last. I closed my front door behind me and sank into my favorite armchair, the one where I had spent decades reading bedtime stories, wiping tears, bandaging scraped knees, and keeping this family afloat. I began to remember everything, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every coin I had spent to give Robert and later his children a life better than I had. I remembered the night his father died suddenly, leaving me alone to raise a 9-year-old boy with nothing but determination and love. I had worked 2 jobs, cleaned offices at night, skipped meals so he could eat, stayed up sewing uniforms to pay for his school supplies, sold my own jewelry so he could attend college. I had never asked for thanks, never expected recognition. But now at 75, I realized that all I had done was quietly fueling the comfort and happiness of a family that had stopped seeing me as their mother, their grandmother, their Evelyn. Robert had married Karen, and I had given them half of the wedding cost without hesitation. I had contributed to their first house down payment, paid for repairs, covered emergencies, and helped with school fees for my grandchildren. When Robert lost his job 6 months ago, I quietly paid their mortgage so they wouldn't lose their home. Every time they called me Mom, "We'll pay you back," I had smiled, because I never needed repayment. It had been my choice, my love. And yet they saw me as a burden. That birthday card was simply the final straw. That night, alone in my modest home, I made decisions I should have made decades ago. I gathered all my bank documents, my investment certificates, and the information about a small property I had inherited from my late sister, a beachfront rental in Florida I had never mentioned to anyone. Quietly, I had invested, saved, and built a nest egg that no one suspected existed. I've realized that for years. I had been both the foundation of their comfort and invisible in their hearts. I canceled the automatic transfers to Robert's account. I closed the shared emergency account. I changed my will so that everything I had intended for Robert and Karen would now go to a charity supporting abandoned and elderly women, and to my grandchildren, but only if they proved a genuine relationship with me. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my old gray suit, the one I had bought for Robert's college graduation but never wore, styled my hair, and sat down to write letters to both Robert and Karen. I explained calmly and clearly what they had lost: my support, my love, my time, and my devotion. I told them that the life they had taken for granted, the money, the stability, The quiet safety of having me as their constant had been entirely my choice. And that choice was now theirs to earn, not assume. I left the letters on the kitchen table, knowing they would find them and feel the weight of my absence. That week, I booked a flight to Florida. I was finally going to see my property, to enjoy the life I had quietly built for myself, to feel free and respected for the first time in decades. For the first time in years, I was excited, unburdened, and alive. I had learned the hardest lesson. Love without respect is not love at all. And no one, no matter their age, is too old to reclaim their dignity. Robert and Karen had thought they could discard me like old furniture, but they didn't realize that the quiet, giving woman they mocked had been holding their world together, and now, finally, she was walking out the door to a life where she mattered. As I boarded the plane, the ocean stretching out beneath me, I smiled. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer taken for granted. I was Evelyn Harper, strong, independent, and finally free. And for the first time in decades, I knew what it felt like to be truly alive.